Ever heard a story so strange, so unbelievable that it makes you question everything you thought you knew about life and death? This is one of those stories. It begins not in a land of fantasy but in the real, bustling heart of Old Delhi during the winter of 1926. A baby girl was born into a simple, ordinary family. They named her Shanti Devi. For the first few years of her life, she was just like any other child, quiet, gentle, and a bit shy. But as she grew, it became clear that her destiny was anything but ordinary. Around the age of 4, when most children are just learning to string sentences together, Shanti began to speak with a startling and mysterious confidence. She wasn't talking about toys or games. She was talking about another life. She calmly told her bewildered parents that she wasn't from Delhi at all. Her real home, she insisted, was in a city called Mathura, over 100 miles away. She said her husband's name was Kedarnath and that he was a cloth merchant. She described their home in vivid detail, a large cream-colored building near a temple and a well. She even spoke of a son they had together. At first, her parents dismissed it. What else could it be but a child's overactive imagination? A charming, if a little strange, fantasy. But Shanti's stories didn't fade. As weeks turned into months and months into years, her descriptions became more precise, more detailed, and frankly, more unsettling. She remembered the exact layout of her old house, down to the narrow stairs and the secret drawers where she had hidden her jewelry. She wasn't just remembering a life. She was remembering a death. She recounted with chilling clarity the story of how she had fallen gravely ill shortly after giving birth to her son, and how she had passed away in agonizing pain. How could a 4-year-old girl possibly know such things? The details were so specific, so emotionally charged that her mother began to feel a deep sense of unease. By the time Shanti was 6, her longing for this other life, this other family, became an overwhelming obsession. Her heart ached for Mathura, for her husband Kedarnath, and for the son she felt she had left behind. It was a grief that no one could understand. One morning, driven by this desperate yearning, she tried to run away from home, determined to find her way back to Mathura. Her family managed to stop her, but her pleas only grew more intense. She continued to repeat names, places, and events that no one in her Delhi household had ever heard of. What was even more baffling was her language. She started speaking in a specific dialect of Hindi, one that was common in the Mathura region, but completely foreign to her family and neighbors in Delhi. She had never been taught it, never even heard it before. Word began to spread through the neighborhood. People started whispering. Was this child gifted? Was she touched by something divine? Or was something far more mysterious, perhaps even dangerous, at play? The story of the little girl who remembered her past life was just beginning, and it was about to draw the attention of people far beyond her small community. What started as a family's private confusion was slowly turning into a public phenomenon, one that would eventually capture the imagination of an entire nation and challenge the very boundaries of science and belief. By the time Shanti Devi turned 9, her story had traveled far beyond her small neighborhood in Delhi. Teachers, neighbors, and even local officials were all talking about the girl who remembered her past life. Even the most hardened skeptics started to wonder, how could a little girl describe places and people she had never seen with such vivid detail? One day her headmaster, a man intrigued but also cautious, decided to put her to the test. He asked her a direct question. What was the name of her husband from her past life? Without a moment's hesitation, Shanti replied, Pandit Kedarnath Chaubey of Mathura. The headmaster was stunned by her confidence. So he did something that would change everything. He wrote a letter addressed to that very name, in that very city. Weeks passed, and then a reply arrived. It confirmed the impossible. Yes, there was a cloth merchant in Mathura named Kedarnath Chaubey. And yes, his wife, Lugdi Devi, had tragically died 9 years earlier, shortly after giving birth. Kedarnath himself, overwhelmed with curiosity and perhaps a little bit of fear, agreed to travel to Delhi. He had to meet this child who claimed to be his deceased wife, reborn. The day of the meeting was thick with anticipation. When Kedarnath arrived at the Devi household, he didn't come alone. He brought his young son, the very child whose birth had led to Lugdi Devi's death. But to test the girl, Kedarnath came in disguise, pretending to be his own brother. He wanted to see if she would be fooled. The moment Shanti laid eyes on him, she didn't rush forward or seem confused. Instead, she lowered her gaze and whispered, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. Why did you come dressed like my brother? The room fell into a stunned silence. Every person there felt a chill run down their spine. How could she possibly know? Then her eyes fell upon the young boy standing beside Kedarnath. Tears welled up in her eyes and began streaming down her face. She called the boy by a secret pet name, a name that only Shanti Devi had ever used for him. Kedarnath was visibly shaken. This was no ordinary child. This was something beyond explanation. Later, in a private conversation away from the crowd, Shanti began to recount intimate details of their life together. She described the exact spot where they kept the house keys. She reminded him of a promise he had made to her on her deathbed, that he would never remarry. She even described the unique design of the small temple in their bedroom. Every single word, every minute detail, was perfectly accurate. Kedarnath was left speechless, his skepticism completely shattered. The story of the meeting spread like wildfire. Newspapers across India picked it up, and scholars began to debate the case fiercely. Was it a hoax? Was it a miracle? The phenomenon became so widely discussed that it eventually reached the ears of one of the most respected figures in the world, Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi, known for his rational mind, was naturally skeptical, but he was also deeply intrigued by the consistency and conviction in Shanti's story. He invited the young girl to meet with him personally. After listening to her speak, watching her calm demeanor as she recounted her memories, Gandhi was moved. He suggested that an official committee should be formed to investigate her claims thoroughly and scientifically, and so a commission of 15 highly respected individuals was assembled. It included professors, lawyers, and journalists, people who were trained to find the truth and expose any falsehoods. Their mission was clear: travel with Shanti Devi to Mathura and determine once and for all if her memories were real. In November of 1935, the committee, along with Shanti Devi and her family, boarded a train to Mathura. For the 9-year-old girl, this was the first time she had ever been to the city, at least in this lifetime. As the train rumbled closer to its destination, a visible change came over her. Her face lit up with excitement and anticipation. Long before the train even pulled into the station, she suddenly pointed out the window and exclaimed, "Look, that's where my house is." The committee members exchanged puzzled glances. How could she recognize anything from this distance? When they finally arrived, they let her lead the way. Shanti navigated the winding, bustling streets of Mathura with an unerring confidence. She walked past busy markets and down narrow alleyways, making turns at junctions without a single moment of hesitation. The group of investigators followed, mesmerized, as she finally stopped in front of a modest, cream-colored house. "This is my home," she said softly, a world of emotion in her voice. She walked straight inside, as if she had done it 1,000 times before. She moved through the house, recognizing each room one by one. She pointed to the courtyard, the well where she used to draw water, and the small prayer corner in the kitchen. She then walked over to a small wooden chest and declared, "My jewelry is kept in there." When the committee opened it, they found ornaments that perfectly matched the descriptions she had given them back in Delhi. Her incredible knowledge wasn't just limited to places. It extended to people as well. She called out relatives by their correct names, greeted old family servants she had never met in this life, and even recalled a specific argument between her past life husband and father-in-law over money, a private family dispute that had indeed taken place years earlier. The investigators were meticulous. They were skeptical. They cross-questioned her relentlessly, trying to find any hole in her story, any evidence of coaching or deception. But they found nothing. Every question she was asked, she answered with uncanny accuracy, her demeanor always calm and unafraid. When the committee finally filed its official report in 1936, their conclusion sent shockwaves through the academic and spiritual communities. The report stated, "The case of Shanti Devi cannot be explained by ordinary human experience. It appears that the girl remembers a past life. This wasn't just a family story anymore. It was a documented phenomenon investigated by experts who had set out to debunk it, but instead had confirmed it." The events in Mathura sent shockwaves across the nation. Newspapers splashed her face on the front page, calling her the girl who lived twice. Suddenly, this quiet child was a phenomenon. Ordinary people traveled for miles, sometimes for days, just to catch a glimpse of her, hoping to see with their own eyes someone who seemed to carry undeniable proof of rebirth. But with this overwhelming fame came a wave of intense scrutiny and questions. Was this truly a case of reincarnation, a soul returning to its earthly journey? Or was it some strange, complex psychological phenomenon that science had not yet begun to understand? By the late 1930s, Shanti Devi's story had broken free from the borders of India and captured the world's imagination. Foreign journalists, spiritual leaders, and pioneering researchers in human consciousness all began to discuss what became known as the Delhi reincarnation case. For some, it was the ultimate validation of ancient Indian philosophy, tangible evidence of an eternal soul. For others, it was a fascinating puzzle of memory, suggestibility, or perhaps some hidden knowledge she had absorbed without realizing. Yet one thing united everyone who met her: Shanti's unshakable, calm certainty. She never appeared to be performing or exaggerating her story for effect. Even when surrounded by the most hardened skeptics, her voice remained steady, her gaze unwavering. When a journalist asked if she feared being doubted, her reply was simple and profound. "I remember what I remember. Whether you believe it or not doesn't change the truth." Naturally, the scientific community was both fascinated and skeptical. Over the years, investigators from various fields tried to find a rational explanation for her incredibly detailed memories. Psychologists proposed theories like cryptomnesia, the idea that her mind might have subconsciously absorbed stories about Mathura from travelers or books, then later recalled them as her own memories. But the specifics she knew, the names of obscure family members, private conversations, the exact layout of a house she'd never seen in this life, made that explanation feel incomplete, a puzzle with too many missing pieces. In 1936, a researcher named Balchand Nahata set out specifically to disprove the case. He compiled a detailed counter-report, suggesting that social reinforcement and leading questions from her family and the commission might have unintentionally shaped her answers. But even Nahata, in his own report, had to admit that he could not fully explain certain coincidences that, in his words, defied logic. The public debate grew larger than the girl at its center. It became a reflection of the timeless tug-of-war between science and spirituality, reason and faith. Decades passed, but the story of Shanti Devi refused to fade away. It resurfaced in the latter half of the 20th century as a new generation of parapsychologists and reincarnation researchers began to systematically study such cases. In 1986, the world-renowned American psychiatrist Dr. Ian Stevenson, famous for his meticulous investigation of over 3,000 alleged past life cases, traveled to India to interview Shanti Devi personally. He found her, now a middle-aged woman, to be just as consistent as she was as a child. 60 years after the original events, her memories hadn't blurred and her facts hadn't shifted. Working alongside him was Indian researcher K.S. Rawat, who re-examined the original records. He confirmed that nearly every single geographical and familial detail Shanti had provided in the 1930s perfectly matched existing records and testimonies from Mathura. After his exhaustive review, Dr. Stevenson would later describe her story as one of the most compelling and carefully documented cases of apparent reincarnation on record. After the intense period of investigations finally slowed, Shanti Devi chose to step out of the spotlight and live a quiet, unassuming life in Delhi. She never once sought money, fame, or publicity from her extraordinary story. Those who knew her in her later years described her as a gentle, deeply spiritual, and introspective woman, someone who seemed to have seen too much of life and death to get caught up in arguments about belief. She never married. When asked why, she would calmly explain that she had already lived that part of life once, with her husband in Mathura. When she spoke of that city, those who listened said her eyes would soften, as if she were remembering a cherished home that existed just across the veil of a lifetime. In December of 1987, at the age of 61, Shanti Devi passed away peacefully. Her final wish was a simple one, that people should live truthfully because, as she believed, our actions follow us beyond what we see. Nearly a century later, her story continues to echo. It appears in psychology journals, spiritual forums, documentaries, and even university classrooms discussing the nature of consciousness. For believers, Shanti Devi is living, breathing proof that the soul is eternal. For skeptics, she remains an intriguing, unsolved mystery, a case that science has yet to fully decode. But perhaps her greatest legacy isn't an answer, but the profound question she left behind for all of us. If memories can survive death, then what else might endure? Maybe Shanti Devi wasn't born to prove anything to the world. Maybe she was born simply to remind us that life is not always a straight line between birth and death, but perhaps a circle, endlessly, beautifully turning. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey. If this story moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that challenge the way we see the world. We'll see you next time.